Wow, wow, wow. Exciting times. Welcome to the first episode of the Shift podcast. And it is just amazing to have an amazing guest with me today. And this podcast is all about helping people to shift their dreams into realities. And so it's all about inspiration. This is for leaders. This is for people who just wants to see their dreams coming to a reality. So I will be having inspirational guests with me every week that's coming in to inspire us, how they've shifted their dreams into reality. So that is the whole vibe. The whole picture is to get you to that place of becoming a better version of yourself. So just a quick background on my first inspirational guest. His name is Chris Flynn, and he's born in Cardiff. He's an ex-soldier and owner of the Green Mile training camp and mountain yoga studio situated in the hills surrounding Cardiff. He's worked around the world in the Middle East, in America and Australia, and returned home to produce his first cartoon series, which attempted to positively influence children's health. It was called, and it is called, Cartoon Fitness. So without further ado, welcome, Chris, my brother. Welcome, man.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah, man. You know what is so really crazy is like when I said I was going to start with this podcast and I was thinking about, getting inspirational people, I knew I had to get you on this first one.
Is that right?
To set the bar. So, man,
no pressure.
Welcome, man. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining. What have you been up to this week?
This week, well, we worked together partially this week, didn't we?
Yeah.
Cardiff City under-21s, under-18s football club we had with us up at the camp for their second instalment of development training. So taking the youth of Cardiff City football through to try and focus on things perhaps off the pitch.
Yeah.
So we were talking to them on a number of things. The first instalment we had with them was about health. What you would hear, health and well-being, you hear a lot of that these days.
Yeah.
We're focusing in on health. Let's just keep it health. On how to think properly, how to focus, how to increase attention span. We talked a little bit about sleep, about attitude, about gratitude, which forms part of attitude. Just a quick reminder to them on exactly how blessed they are to be where they are, to be an academy of football like that with people just throwing themselves at these players, trying to develop them on and off the pitch. Yeah. I just wanted them to know just where you're at, lads, because I think when you are saturated in blessings like that, when you've just got thing after thing after thing, material wealth, opportunities, they're getting shoes and tracksuits thrown at them. These guys forget it. And all they're doing, a lot of the time they're coming up, the younger guys coming up and finding problems. And I'm thinking, lads, you need to daily practice that attitude of gratitude.
Exactly. It was really good, coming on, giving the opportunity, you and your guys, which we'll find out more about the Green Mile training. It was great just to come alongside motivating these guys and letting them have this shift that we're talking about in this podcast. That's exactly what I want people to get from it, that it's about how do I shift that? How do I shift my mindset? How do I transition? How do I, like you say, attitude of gratitude, those sort of things could help people shift, their mindset. So, it was really great with these guys and it was just fantastic. So go to just a little bit of background of who you are, and then, we continue with this amazing interview, man.
So my background starts in this city. I'm a Cardiff boy. I'm from North Cardiff. I grew up in Lisvane, Thornhill, Lanishon. My parents bounced around a bit. And I feel very blessed to be from that part of the city. It was surrounded by greenery, at a backdrop of the mountains. So I had the city life, but then I also had a bit of, I suppose, rural life. I could escape into the hills and do what boys do growing up on their bikes and stuff. 5 brothers, a large family, much of which still remain in Cardiff. So, I had a healthy upbringing. But I always had a calling, I suppose, from, 8, 9, 10. I used to collect military gear. I had a World War II gas mask for Christmas once.
For Christmas.
My grandfather got me a World War II grenade, decommissioned, of course. And my dad would bring me home Soldier magazine because I would just pore over the page of these guys doing difficult things. It just, I don't know what it was. It was very aesthetic, it like they looked like they were doing the business in these magazines. And I just thought, I just found it so appealing. So I suppose I was always destined to go down that kind of route, from a young age. Always did a lot of sport, very, very active. My dad was a fell runner. He was a good mountain runner. Could have competed it did compete to a high level. Brothers all into sport. And I left Llanishen High School, which I know you know well.
That's it.
My
school I work in, yeah.
Big fan. Left there in 99. I did less than a year in college in St. David's, and it just wasn't for me. There was just no one doing anything that appealed to me right there. It was just people just smoking this, smoking that, just going through the motions. And I was like so uninspired. And that was the same from school and to college. So I joined up. I joined the military, and I ended up serving 12 and a half years until I was 30.
Wow.
So I spent all my formative years as a young man in the military, which was a good apprenticeship in how to be a man. Lots of good lessons, lots of bad ones. Things I could take from the wrong side of doing things. And then came out at 30, ready to start again.
Yeah. What was that shift for you there in terms of transition from being in the army to coming back to Cardiff?
So I didn't come initially back to Cardiff for long anyway. I left. I was requalifying in occupational health. I was studying that. I had a plan that I'd written down on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to get into. I gave my sergeant major that plan. And so if you're going to leave the military, you have to give a year's notice.
Wow, okay.
You have to give it, they call it a year for the Queen. So you hand in your notice, a year later you can leave. So you used to buy your way out. And then all that kind of stopped when I joined up around that time. And then you had to give a year's notice. So I went to see my sergeant major and I said, listen, here's my plan. I put it on his desk. I said, I've got this course, that course, this course. I've sorted everything out. This is what I want to do. I said, can I have some time off? And he kind of looks at his watch and he's like, make sure you leave your phone on. Skedaddle, And I was out the door before he finished his sentence. And I had like 10 months paid for off. I had to go back and check in every now and then, but I just requalified in lots of different things. Occupational health, I was doing a diploma in, which is going to take me a few years. And during all of that, I moved back to Cardiff. And, that was a rough time. That was a rough time, I think. In the military, you have a ready-made identity. You wear it. You physically put that identity on every day.
Yeah.
I was with the paras and the commandos. I was a physical training instructor. I was a forward air controller, so as part of a small team that we did. It was a high-level job, lots of responsibility, lots of consequences if you get it wrong. So that's a strong identity. Arguably one of the strongest brotherhoods in the country is some of those military units. And when you belong to that, it's hard just to leave like that. And I did. I left my friends, my job, my family, my future. I just said I'm going to start again, and so it was tough. And the time when I look back on that time now, I had a family, I had a big family, I had some savings, I had a good past, I had loads of opportunities in my future. I had qualifications, I was studying, I was healthy, and I struggled, and it made me think about those with no family, with no money, with little opportunities, or less opportunities, and how are they getting on? How are they getting on? My heart really cried out for people who didn't have as much as me. I felt very, very blessed, and yet I still struggled.
Yeah. Do you know, when I don't know if it's a stigma or when men and women come from the army, like when they come back to civilian life, like how some people struggle to actually adapt into civilian life. What was it like for you?
I don't think the adaptation was too bad because I always kept my hand in with my family. I would come home frequently if on leave. I would come home. So I always kept a civilian feel about me, you know what I mean?
Okay.
But many of my pals were the opposite. They were just military through and through.
Okay.
You know, they would be there on the weekends, on leave. They would just go away with other soldiers, other guys they work with. So they didn't really keep their hand in the mix. Okay. I always had my hand in the mix. So it was easier on me. I had brothers to lean on. And I was able to navigate that. I think the thing for me was I always had a vision of where I was going in the military. I knew what units, what courses I wanted to do, what the things I wanted to achieve, and I achieved pretty much all of them. And now you're left with this just horizon of potential in front of you, which is great, but it's also quite daunting. So I struggle with that. I split up with my ex at the time as well. So it was a lot of change, and you know, a lot of change condensed into a very small portion of my life, and yeah, it was a rocky road for about a year.
Yeah. You know, when you were saying about the age of 8 years old, this dream of going to the military,
yeah,
like you did that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so going into the military, my dream has become a reality now. And I'm just quite curious in terms of like, okay, that was the dream. Why didn't he stay there if that was the dream? Yeah. And then obviously then you transitioned into where you are now, which we're going to talk about. But how was that kind of like, this is your dream? And now you kind of like, did you walk away from it, or is it still part of what you're doing?
I suppose I'm still, it is still part of what I'm doing. It is a big part of me. You know, I do wear that. I suppose even the colours that I often wear, you can see that there's representatives of it even in what I wear today. It is a strong part of me. So I've taken the good out of that and I've carried it forward. But I think, so I did a few tours of Afghanistan. It was quite an intense period of Middle East operations. And I got, because of my job, I was a forward air controller. So I used to call in airstrikes. It was quite a high responsible job. So we were quite in demand in the military, you know, and you know, the end result of that job is explosions on top of people. That's it, you know. So you're in a firefight, and your job is to end that firefight by calling in an airstrike, taking out a building with a number of, you know, hopefully bad guys inside, and you know, that's quite intense, you know. And I think when I was over in Afghan, it was on my last tour, I just started questioning what on earth we were doing. You know, it's like, we're not put here to do this. You know what I mean? It's like, you can find any excuse to go and seek bad guys. They're in every country. But why are we here doing this? And I couldn't get any straight answers, any kind of moral answers that made sense to me. And I'm like, so I had this fire in my belly for the military, but I think it was, the flame was put out by what the military were doing, you know. And I just thought, I did have aspirations of going on and serving with other units in the military. I spent probably 10 years from joining up thinking about nothing else than joining, you know, these higher tier units. And I thought, if I get into that unit, I'm just going to come back in a different style of uniform, essentially doing the same thing, dropping bombs on people's houses, you know. And I know it's quite heavy, but it's not what we're here for. It's not what we're here for. And just something morally, and I hadn't really thought morally like this as a guy in my 20s until this time. And I'm approaching 30 now, and there was just this thing. It's not what we're here for. You know? So I thought, okay, fine. I've done my bit. I've ticked a lot of boxes. Had some badges on my arm. I thought, I'm stepping out. I'm young enough to reinvent myself and start again. I'm only 30. You know, I've had a good apprenticeship in leadership, you know, and some other bits. Let's go see what's outside. You know?
Speaking about what's outside, Green Mile Training Camp. Tell us the name, the purpose behind it, and what does it serve?
So the Green Mile Training Camp, it's a facility just behind Cardiff in the mountains, 110-acre outdoor training facility. It's been rolling now for 3.5 years, and it began. Its kind of first seedlings began in a men's physical training movement that I set up 5.5 years ago to try and put men on a stronger path.
Okay.
So, you know, much to do with the military background, but just since leaving the military, I'd moved abroad. Lived in America, in Dubai for a long time, Australia. And then I always had this call to come home. You know, I have a big family at home. So I was pulled back. And I came home and I instantly recognized just the condition of men in the city. You could say people, it's not much different for women, but certainly men, the current political language around guys and all the rest of it was having an impact, but their physical health, their mental, emotional, spiritual health was all out of whack. And you could see it in their eyes.
Yeah.
You could see it in their eyes. And I thought, well, I knew 6 guys who'd taken their own lives, military and civilian. I knew 6. And at the time, my dad was approaching 60, I think. He knew 1. And I was like, by this time, 36, something like that. And I knew 6 people, 6 guys. So I thought, something's going on, and okay, what can you do about it? I thought, I know a bit about physical training. I'd spent a year in the bottom myself, in the pit, the psychological pit, after getting out of the military. And, I was in a rough place for about a year. So I knew what it felt like to feel rough, in your mind and all the rest of it. But during that year that I'd gotten out of the military and I felt rough, a loss of identity and all the rest of it, I still trained. Like, training was my medication. Do you know what I mean? I still trained. I trained intensively, more so than I had ever before. And it was the thing that kept my head above the water. It was my medication. If I could train, I had some control. I could release some feel-good hormones into my body, some dopamine, endorphin, make myself feel better. There's always tomorrow, and I pulled myself out, and one of the medications was physical training. And I knew how to do that, because I'd been doing that since I was a young boy.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys don't even know how to do that, So I thought, well, I can impart that onto these guys. So I started the Green Mile movement, and the name came from, there's a mile-long track on the mountains behind Cardiff, behind the Team Hour pub.
Yep.
There's a mile-long track down there, and it's like this. It's steep. It's got a plunge pool at the bottom of it, and it's just a mile though, right? So I used to say to guys, "Can you run a mile?" They're like, "Yeah, bro, I can run a mile, easy, bro." And they're like, "Okay, can you run this mile?"
Yeah.
So they come up the Green Mile, and it's an effort to get up there. And then I put a log on their back, and then I put them in the plunge pool, and I say, "Right, let's go up to the top again, and let's go back." And then we'd be carrying each other.
Wow.
It was the Green Mile. It was a hard mile, and everyone's got to walk a hard mile, right? So that's how it became. It was the Green Mile movement. And I started it, I put out 250 flyers, come up with a logo, a motto, fortune favours the brave, because it does. And I put out a lot of flyers. First session I ran, a calisthenics session, teaching guys how to do muscle-ups and pull-ups. No one showed up on the first session. And then the second one, I think 1 guy showed up. The third, maybe 5. And then none. And then 7, and then 1, and then 12, and it just morphed. And I kept rolling, so I'm still going to do it. I do it Saturday mornings originally, and then it grew and grew, and we probably had about 200 guys come through now. There's 100 on the group at the moment. Some guys come every week, some guys dip in and out when they had the time. And we train at the Green Mile Training Camp, which is a facility that we open partially for them, but also as a business as well.
Yeah. 110 acres. I mean, I've been there. I've been to that place. It is just amazing. Like, even like, it's like I would get there, go to the studio, and there's so much more other stuff. That's it's just a big facility in terms of, and what you guys are doing there. And so do you have any partners with you?
Yeah, so myself and Craig McCormack, who is my partner, my business partner, and then Josh O'Dell, who's the general manager of the camp. The 3 of us, the 3 amigos, we run it. So we started the Green Mile Training Camp, training corps, businesses, charities, sports teams, groups. We trained the Welsh men's rugby team for the World Cup.
Yep.
We trained the Welsh women's for the Six Nations. We trained the military, the police. We've had the NHS, the fire service, Cardiff City, Cardiff Devils, all sorts of different groups come up there on the outdoor training camp. And then we built the mountain yoga studio, which sits on the camp. So mountain yoga is obviously daily yoga classes, but we run a lot of health and well-being retreats from there. And we have something now called Fire and Ice.
Okay.
Fire and Ice, hot and cold therapy. So that's really big right now. Teaching people the benefits of hot and cold and how to use that to simulate stress. People are, broken by stress these days, but we can use stress as a tool, as a teacher, and the cold and the hot is that teacher, is that tool to be used. And we show them how to encounter stress and then recalibrate their response to it so they're composed rather than overreacting.
So give me an example of that. Just like when I came there the other day with Cardiff City and the 18s, the boys were in the pool and some like...
That's right.
And then after a couple of minutes or so, and then they were just still.
Yeah.
Didn't say anything,
Exactly.
didn't move.
You should have seen them on the first one, crying like babies, mate. I'm not sure, honestly. They were crying, shrieking, effing and jeffing. It was like, honestly. So I'm like, right, guys, remember your response now. We didn't teach you anything. We just put you in the tub. And, they overreacted. And your reaction determines, the outcome of a situation, right? So we said, right, we took them back in the warm tent. We warm them up. We teach them some tools, give them some protocols to follow. Largely around the breath, around, when you breathe a certain way, like when you get into cold water, it's, they go into their fight and flight system. And we're saying, don't go into your fight and flight system. Let's go into the rest and digest system. And we do it through the nose, using the diaphragm, by breathing less. So we teach them to hypoventilate, not hyperventilate. We try and get them to change the record inside the brain, inside the mind. So instead of saying, cold, 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 stress, 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 awful, awful, awful. Pick a couple of words that resonate with you, that speak strength over you. So say words more like calm, composed, resilient.
While you're in there.
Just repeat it. Just talk to yourself well, because what we always say to teams in there is like, you are the sum total of the things that you say to yourself. Right? You will never rise above the conversation that goes on in your mind.
Come on.
So if your mind is constantly dragging you down by the things that you're saying to yourself, that's where you're going to stay, mate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you're going to stay there. Yeah. And that is something you have a choice over. Forget what everyone else is saying to you. What you say to yourself is the most important. You need to practice a conversation that is strong, that elevates you. And when you get good at that, like, watch what happens.
Yeah.
Watch what happens. It's every person who's been successful, and forget wealth. I'm not talking about wealth or whatever your idea of success is, the next level for you. Whatever that is, it's only the conversation in your mind that will get you there. So that conversation needs to be good.
Yeah.
Elevate
your mindset and embrace shift. Like, what was it like for like any kind of story in terms of whether it's the Welsh Rugby Union or the Cardiff City? How did they, like, after they left the training camp, any good news stories, any stories of like, man, things shifted for me?
We've had loads. We've had loads of people, whether it be teams or just individuals who've come up, certainly on the Fire and Ice. It's a 2-hour session, 20 people in each one. We're running sometimes 9 a week. They're booked out weeks in advance. We've had people coming up and saying, that's the first time I've been able to step outside of my own head, for months, years. It's the first time I slept. We do a sleep masterclass. We teach people how to sleep. And some people, that's the first time I slept in years.
See, that's crazy. It's like, you're teaching me how to sleep. It's like, it doesn't make sense.
No.
Because I just sleep. Or you teach me how to breathe. What would that look like?
Well, the most natural things that we're supposed to do, we've forgotten how to do, right? Eating is one. It's a natural thing that we're supposed to know how to do. And we're all doing it incorrectly. Myself included. It's a struggle. The modern world has got us living a certain way. Drinking mango Pepsi when we should be drinking water.
Oh.
Eating crisps for dinner when we should be eating something nutritious like chicken and some veg.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts there. Like, so I say to people, there's so many things that we've got incorrect. Breathing is just one of them. Breathing's the first thing you ever did in life was take a breath. The last thing you'll ever do is take a breath. The ones in between are there to serve you, and they're there to be used as a tool. We need to know how to do it properly.
Wow.
And we've forgotten. And there's a number of reasons why we're now breathing dysfunctionally. One is that we're sitting down way too much. We're closing off the main breathing muscles. So we're teaching people that we're back to basics. Let's go back to what we once knew. Like sleep is the first pillar of health, or sleep and breathing. they're hand in hand, and we need to know how to do them well. That's our baseline.
Yeah.
Forget marathons, forget deadlifting and bench pressing. All right, let's talk about health. Fitness is a component of health, but we're into health. That's where we're going.
Wow. It's so much more, what are your what were some of the challenges when you guys first started with the Green Mile, and where are you guys now?
The challenges. The challenges, I suppose, there were many. Like most startups, if I go deeper, is that self-belief. It's like, I've never done this before. I'd never run a business before. I'd worked for a few, but I'd never run a business. I didn't understand what it took to turn over, money and make a living from it. Everyone's got to eat, So my partner Craig and Josh, what I was poor at, he was good at. What Craig was poor at, Josh was good at, and the three of us, mutually supporting, just collaborated together, and we got it going. And if something didn't work, we quickly moved, and we moved, and we adapted and overcame. And but I think the big piece at every level of the last 3.5 years has been that self-belief piece. Even as I'm talking about it, I'm still susceptible to, weaker chat inside my mind. And I need to constantly try and elevate the things I'm saying to myself, even when I don't feel like doing it. I've got a big vision for the future. Do you know what I mean? I've got a grand vision over my life and the businesses with the boys. In order to get there, I need to think big. You know what I mean? I need to talk big inside. I need to elevate myself. So that's what I do, because I know it's coming. It's on me. So that's the first thing I do. And everybody is going to suffer with self-doubt. Self-doubt. You hear people in business and sport talking about it all the time, on podcasts and social media, and you think, how, until you try and do something that requires strength, you know what I mean? You never really know how strong you are. You've got to dig deep sometimes. You go to dark psychological places, and you still got to be able to turn the light on when you get there. So,
what is some of the things that you could help people with out there? That is maybe whether it's start a business or it's education or whatever they want to go into in terms of what could help them shift their mindset, and if they want to aspire to become whoever they want to be. What do you think? What was the shift for you, and what do you think? What could shift them moving forward?
There's a big fundamental shift for me. There was a time in my life where everything shifted. We could spend the whole podcast talking about this, but there is a time where everything shifted, and it's very clear exactly what it is for me, and it's very clear exactly what I think it should be for everyone else. You've got to look up. Do you know what I mean? You've got to recognize that you're not on your own. You know what I mean? There's this idea that we're just here by accident, and I just find that so hard to get my head around, that people will experience life and all the complexities of it, and just accept the narrative that it comes from two rocks colliding accidentally a few years ago, and here we are. It's like, no. The moment you look up and you recognize the existence of God, he steps into your life. You know what I mean? He's been there the whole time, but when you open the door and realize he's been knocking the whole time, every single human being, everyone without exception, and that's what it was for me. I'd left Afghan, surrounded by a lot of death. It made me question life a bit more. And I was driving my truck in Dubai one day, and I had BBC World News on the radio. War in Yemen, war in Syria, war in Afghan, war in Iraq. Everywhere was on fire. It just felt like the whole world was on fire. And I remember just looking up and said, okay, well, I'd started dating a girl that was going to church, and some of my mates who had been talking about this, and I just looked up and I prayed, said, if you're there, you're going to have to answer me. You're going to have to say something, because right now I feel pretty lost. It feels like it's all for nothing. And why not just go on a massive binge for the rest of my days and only think about me? Why not? Why can't I do that? I turned the corner in the truck, and he just revealed the universe. He just opened everything up to me and just spoke right into my heart, and in a way that is as real as you and I sat here today, and just said, I'm here. You're not on your own. And I said, okay, well, I can't ignore that. I can't ignore that. And I started investigating, and that's where my strength comes from. It comes from God. That's where my strength comes from. So no two ways about it. And I'm not special. I didn't have any special thing over my life. I'm as special as everybody else. Do you know what I mean? And he spoke to me, and I was deserving of all the condemnation, all the judgment for all the things that I'd done wrong. And there is a long list of a wake of things that I did wrong. And so I wasn't deserving either. But I was still given the forgiveness and the acceptance. And that's where my strength comes from. And when I rely on him, things go well. When I rely on myself, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is the next step for the Green Mile? What is it that you'd like people to get from this?
So we want to change some of the ways that people talk about health. Like if I say health to people often, well, in fact, they come to us thinking we're about fitness. Like fitness is a small component of health, like in the traditional sense, exercise and fitness. We're looking at the larger piece. Do you know what I mean? It's like health is wealth, right? Health is the greatest wealth that you could ever discover. And you only have to be unwell to recognize just how wealthy you are when you are well. Everybody has the key to the vault. You know what I mean? We're sat on this vault full of wealth, and very few people are turning the key. So we want to change the perspective that people have around health, and just realize, listen, it's not about six packs, it's not about biceps or cracking marathons. It's not vanity based. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of different reasons to explore health, but one of them is that the feeling you get. I believe there's so many people in this nation right now. If you just take Wales, Cardiff, there's so many people who have never experienced what it feels like to be healthy. It's like the best drug in the world. When you're firing on all four cylinders, and it doesn't mean you have to have a six-pack or big biceps or long, slender legs in order to do it. It's the feeling you have inside is just fire. You know what I mean? You're just fire. You're sleeping well. Your energy's up there. You're nicer to people. They're nicer to you because they're picking up on all the energy that you're giving off. It's like, that's health. And there's people like, you're talking a different language to me, Chris, and we're trying to get them to talk that language too. Little wins, breathe well, get into the right part of your nervous system first. Let's not live in the stress system. Let's live in the rest system. Sleep well, drink some water, eat some stuff that grows out of the ground. Forget exercise. Let's just move. Do you know what I mean? Get a dog, get out in nature. Do you know what I mean? You stare at a horizon, you instantly feel better.
I've just done my 2-hour walk before I came here.
Did you?
Up in the forest. Yes, my wife asked me, she said, what's the 2 words? Like when it's forest, it's for rest.
Oh, okay.
It's for rest.
It's for rest.
Yeah. So you walk and just you feel rest. You feel a sense of peace, greenery, and so on. So I'm really encouraged by this, man. It's like, is there anything that you could leave people with today in terms of how could they shift things for themselves and turn their dreams into reality?
I would say remove some distractions. I think that was a big one for me. Is like, just quieten the noise. The device is the main one. Just have a week switching some stuff off and just think through logically without any other noise going on. No music, no podcast, no YouTube, Instagram. Have a day, have a week off. Do you know what I mean? And just see what comes to the mind. You know what I mean? Everyone has some ideas in there. Everyone. If you can buy yourself some stillness, whenever you can, switch it off. And just ponder it, what it is you want to do. What's on your heart? Like, what is it you want to do? And if things come to mind, write them down.
Write them down.
Write them down. Writing and speaking is thinking. If you want to think well, put it on the paper.
Writing and speaking is thinking.
It's thinking.
I like that. Writing and speaking is thinking. So, wow. I like that, man. It's like, man, even as I'm doing the podcast, I'm just still thinking about stuff that you're saying, which means I now also need to go and reflect. But man, Chris, thank you so much for joining me here today. The first episode of many, many episodes out there. And it's about, how can people get in contact with you guys?
So we are at info at the Green Mile Training Camp. Green Mile Training Camp on Insta and Facebook.
Yeah.
Or the same for mountain yoga. And they'll find us on there. And if they've got any questions about what we do, send us an email. We'll get right back to you.
Man, brother, thank you so much for joining me, man. And guys, catch you guys next week on the next episode. And this is what I'm talking about. It's about how to shift your mindset, how to elevate your mindset, and how to embrace the shift. Catch you on the next one. Peace.